Hello and welcome back to the Opposites Abroad podcast, a podcast about all things travel. Today we're talking about a country that I, Charlie, haven't been to, but Traveller Tattoo, TT down in Denver, has been. It's Argentina, and it turns out it's the 8th largest country in the world. One of the great pleasures of doing this podcast is you get to research all these countries, and I had no idea that Argentina was the 8th largest country in the world, second largest country in South America after Brazil, but with a population of just 47 million, which if you do the maths, it makes it pretty sparsely populated. So Argentina has high literacy rates, it's rich in natural resources, it has well-developed industrial and agricultural sectors, and it was one of the leading economies in the world 100 years ago, but it has been, I think anyone across the political divide would agree, it's been catastrophically mismanaged in the last century, and the people have gone from some of the wealthiest on the planet to wrestling with inflation, which has often been in excess of 100% per year. And now almost half the population lives in poverty, and it's kind of lurched from economic disaster to economic disaster for decades. But it all changed recently in 2023. Javier Milei was elected on a promise to finally tame the economy. He's been described as everything from a populist to a fascist to a libertarian. Pick your adjective/noun to describe him with. But he's slashed public spending and seems to be finally getting inflation under control. But it's coming at a high social cost, and time will tell whether he's a success or just compounds the disaster that the Argentinian people have sadly had to live through for the last 100 years. But it's certainly an interesting time to be talking about Argentina. And TT, you went at an interesting time. It was last year, wasn't it?
I did. I went to Buenos Aires on a vacation, and I absolutely loved it. I really didn't have a lot of expectations, and it was one of my favorite trips I think I've ever done.
We'll go into detail, obviously, but just if you were to give the elevator pitch on why you enjoyed Argentina so much, what would you say?
It's super cheap. It's super interesting. The food is outstanding. Lots of history and culture. Lots of things to do. Not super touristy. I thought it was a way better place, or way better trip than I expected.
And in my intro, I talked about the economy, and it's kind of the dominant element of Argentinian life is this disastrous economy that's been disastrous now for well over half a century. Is that something you pick up on quite early on, that it's not a healthy, well-functioning economy?
Absolutely, and it's one of those kind of sad things where what makes a country not functioning well makes it good to go to as a tourist sometimes, because as someone from a country with a stable economy going to a place without having the means, you can live very well there, or you can travel very well there, and unfortunately the locals don't have the same opportunities that we have. So it's kind of sad in a way, but it is a great place to travel right now if you are from a place that's more stable like the United States or Canada, because the dollar just goes so far. I would say Buenos Aires looks like a crumbling European city. So it looks like if Paris or London was abandoned for 50 years, is basically how it looks. You can tell it used to be incredibly opulent. There's wide boulevards with beautiful buildings that are abandoned. The food is just ungodly cheap, even for someone who travels considerably. It's amazing how cheap it is. Like, I'd go to a really nice steakhouse, an upscale steakhouse where the waiters are dressed nice and it's a upper clientele, and I'd have a steak and a side and 2 glasses of wine that are poured to the brim because they don't pour like they do in the United States, and my bill would be $10 US.
No.
Yeah. It was crazy cheap.
Wow, that's incredible, because I know I have some friends who went on a ski trip there, and they said that the ski resorts are outrageously expensive because most of them are in the middle of nowhere up a dirt track. So by the time you've got there, they can basically charge what they want, and you're talking minimum 200 US per night for a hotel. And
Yeah.
so it's interesting that in the city, I guess because you've got the luxury of choice, they just can't charge that amount. But I didn't know it was that cheap.
It was really cheap, and I didn't see a ton of tourists when I walked around. And actually, I did have a couple tourists come up to me and start asking me for directions because they thought I was from there. Because the interesting thing about Argentina is that they don't generally consider themselves South American. They consider themselves European. So they view themselves as we're a country of Europe in the middle of South America, or at the bottom of South America, and for the most part, they look very European. There's no good easy way to say this, but when the Spanish came and they conquered Mexico, they killed and did a whole lot of horrible things, but they also interbred with the locals. Same thing in Brazil, same thing in a lot of places. That didn't happen in Argentina. They basically slaughtered the natives and just put themselves in power. So there's not a lot of people in Argentina, especially in the big cities, that have a lot of native blood. They're mostly European blood. It's really strange. And when you're there, you're thinking, man, this looks like Europe. Everyone looks European. They consider themselves European. It's a very, very strange place in that aspect.
Now, I know you're a man that likes to stay in nice places, or for whom where you stay is a part of the trip. And I remember you telling me that you had an interesting experience when you first checked into the hotel.
I did. I had an experience that I've never had anywhere else I've ever been. And I checked into a hotel, and it was a Western brand hotel, a nice hotel. So we're not talking a Airbnb, we're not talking some mom and pop bed and breakfast. This is actually a legit hotel with a legit hotel name, from a Western company. And I had booked it online, so when I checked in, I had not prepaid, and I went to hand the guy my credit card, and he said, "If you'll pay in American cash, we'll give you it for half price."
Really? What? Because the
economy's so bad,
the currency's so unpredictable.
And I was so surprised, and I said, "Really?" Because I was there for a week, basically.
So it's a pretty significant bill by local standards.
Yeah, pretty significant bill, immediately cut in half. And fortunately, I had enough cash to cover it, because why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
And
100%.
I was so weirded out by the thing that I said, well, I want a receipt, because I thought, I'm gonna give this guy a bunch of cash, and it's like his last day at work, and he's just gonna disappear, and then they'll be banging on my door saying I never paid for my room. So, but it was legit. That's what they wanted, and he wrote me a receipt, and I had a really nice stay at the hotel, but I've never ever had a place offer me a room for cash for half price when I checked in.
And that's amazing, because as you say, it's not some family establishment where they just quietly pocket the cash. This is a big, well-known chain of hotels, which I'm assuming you're not naming so that nobody gets in trouble, but it's suffice to say it would be a hotel chain that everybody listening to this would have heard of.
Correct.
So that was kind of your intro to Buenos Aires. What are the first impressions when you're walking around? You say it feels European. You could kind of kid yourself that you're in a Spanish city.
I felt like you could. I was actually pretty worried, because if you Google travel to Buenos Aires or you watch YouTube videos, everyone talks about how unsafe it is, and that you're going to get robbed, that this horrible stuff's going to happen to you, that you've got to be unbelievably careful, you're going to get pickpocketed. And so I was actually pretty worried to venture out, because I just had read so many horror stories, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to walk out and people will be following me around. But I mentioned in previous podcasts, I when I travel, I really try not to look American, and I tend to dress more European by nature anyways. So I kind of just blended in with people. I tend to use a crossbody for like my wallet and things when I travel, and instead of having stuff in my pockets. And I never had any problems. I never had anybody look at me weird. I never felt unsafe. Now, I didn't wander around the dark, and I didn't wander around alleyways and things like that, but I never felt unsafe. I walked with purpose. I can kind of dress like a local. As I said, I was mistaken for a local a couple times by tourists, and I really didn't have that many issues. But I do think it is a place you have to be careful, and it's not a place that you want to go with your New York Yankee hat on in a big wallet jammed in your back of your jeans, talking loudly, walking down the street. That's probably not the place to do it.
Did it feel different at night? I know we've discussed before you're not a night owl, but you must have found yourself out and about at night occasionally.
No. Well, I mean, a little bit, but I went to a couple restaurants at night, but they were literally like a stone's throw from the hotel, that were more like local, like steakhouses locals went to, like old steakhouses. And I felt like in an absolute emergency, I could run to the hotel before someone could catch me.
Yeah.
So I felt pretty safe doing that, but I didn't go wander out too far at night.
And actually, I think on this podcast, we always find an excuse to give kind of general travel tips from our sometimes bitter experience. But I think looking purposeful and confident and walking with your shoulders back is actually a huge element in staying safe. And I remember listening to a guest on another podcast. Other podcasts are available beyond Opposites Abroad. A guest on a podcast said that they'd done a test where they'd got reformed criminals, muggers, pickpockets, and shown them a video of people walking down the street and said, who would you not pick on here? Who would you leave alone? And interestingly enough, they weren't always too worried about the big muscle heads with covered in tats and shaved heads. It sounds like a combination of you and me. You've got the tats, I've got the shaved head, but neither of us are the muscle man. But it wasn't necessarily the big, tough-looking people that they were worried about or that they would avoid. It was people that were purposeful and looked like they knew what they were doing and confident. And I'm pretty small, but both you and I are relatively slim. We probably look like we could run reasonably fast. We don't look kind of podgy, and we don't look like easy targets, I would say. And so I think anytime you're traveling, if you can try to look confident, even if you're not, try and look like you know where you're going, even if you're not, and then just check the map by ducking into a hotel lobby or something. I feel like that's a really good way of staying safe.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. You walk with purpose. If you feel like you're lost, you walk with purpose into some place that looks more crowded or touristy or where there's people, and then go into a store, go into a little shop and look at your map then and figure it out. But don't stop at a intersection blindly with your mouth open, staring around like you have no idea where you are.
Yeah, I actually, just to detour slightly, the only time I've been to South America, I spent 3.5 weeks in Bolivia, and we were in La Paz one evening, and La Paz seemed to me like a city that transforms at night. So walking around in the day, I didn't really think about safety, and then at night it just felt like the spooky stuff came out of the shadows a little bit. And we were walking back from a restaurant, and I was with a group of people, and myself and another guy noticed two guys drop in behind us and seemingly watching us / following us, paying attention to us. And me and this guy had a kind of quick decision to make. Do we either tell the group or what do we do? And I said, look, just drop back. So it was him and I were slightly separated from the group, and we kind of turned and really eyeballed these two guys. Not because I thought we could have taken them on, but in a way, just kind of letting them know that, hey, if you are going to do something, we're ready for you. We're probably not going to be easy targets who are naively wandering along, and you're going to surprise. You're not going to surprise us. And maybe they weren't intending to do anything. They certainly wouldn't have been scared by either of us, but for whatever reason, we saw them conferring, and they kind of disappeared off down a side street, and we never saw them again. And I'm kind of convinced that because we made it obvious that we were expecting them and weren't necessarily intimidated by the prospect, that we probably got away with it. So, yeah, look confident, look like you know where you're going.
Well, and I, as you know, I like nice things, but when I'm in a place like Buenos Aires, I don't wear anything with any kind of brand labels. I don't wear a watch. I don't wear rings. I don't wear any type of jewelry. I I wear things that I might know that are nice, but nobody else is going to know that's nice because it just is not flashy. It's not a place to be walking with a fancy bag or fancy anything. And I think if you walk with purpose, you don't stand out. You try to look local. You'll be okay. I don't talk out loud a lot. Um, I don't say like howdy. When someone walks past me to draw attention to myself. So for all they know, all I speak is Spanish.
Yeah, I mean, what do you feel is the nature of the crime there? I mean, is it kind of pickpocketing, violent crime? I know you've said it's not particularly dangerous, but were people to go, what do they keep an eye out for?
I think it's pickpockets, being robbed, street robbery type stuff. I don't think it's like South Africa where you could get kidnapped or raped or God knows what. I don't think it's that bad, but I think the robberies are probably the really dangerous things there.
Okay, so shifting it back to happier topics, people talk a lot, and you've already touched on it, about the food in Argentina. It's particularly known for its steaks and wine. Are the cliches true?
They are true, and I think it is not a place that you're going to get the most out of if you don't eat red meat, because they generally eat it at every meal that I could see. Now, there's other stuff there that is very interesting. There's an Argentina style pizza that I had one night that I thought was outstanding, but it's really a steak place. And the cool thing about it going there is you can't get steak from Argentina in the United States. It's basically banned by the FDA because they don't want to hurt American farmers by bringing in Argentinian beef. But I would say you've got probably American, Argentinian, and Japanese beef are probably the best steaks in the world would be my guess. And you're having a steak that, I mean, I'm going actually to a steakhouse in Denver tomorrow night for dinner. That's a really good steakhouse. And I was looking at the menu yesterday to try to see what I wanted. And the steak I want, which is a ribeye with no sides at all, is $98 in Denver. And
I feel like I've been physically injured by that information.
And you go to Argentina and you get a steak that is equally as good, maybe arguably even better, for $10, and that includes 2 glasses of wine and a side. I mean, you'd spend easy $200 plus tip in Denver on that same exact meal. So it's 5% of the cost of that meal. It's unbelievable to me.
If you want to go for 5 nights of steak in a row, it's probably cheaper to fly to Buenos Aires,
I would say,
than stay at home.
I would say for sure. Yeah. I think I would actually, because I love steak. And when I was there, I thought I actually would like to live here for like a month, not just to eat the steak, but because there's so many cool museums. It's just really a cool place. And the wine is outstanding. Argentina is known for wine. And like I said, you order wine in the United States and they're so cheap with how much wine they give you, and they're staring at it trying to give you one finger or whatever of wine, and most of your glass is just glass, empty glass. When you get a wine in Argentina, it is filled to the brim. and I think the breaks down to maybe $1.50 a glass or something at a nice restaurant, and it doesn't feel like, you always feel like when you're in the United States and you order wine, you're kind of getting taken a little bit. Like,
yeah, you're getting ridden a bit.
You didn't feel that way in Argentina.
You just mentioned then things to see. What are the standout sites you went to, or is it one of those places, I guess like Tokyo, which we seem to talk about on every episode, where actually just wandering around is the best option? Or are there specific sites that you'd recommend seeing?
I probably wouldn't just wander around because of the safety aspect.
Right.
I would have purpose of where you're going and stay in certain areas. The part of the problem when you're in other countries that you're not familiar with is you can wander into a really bad area and it looks the same as the other areas to you because you're not from there. So The art museum is incredible, absolutely incredible. It's a lot of European art, a lot of art from Argentina. I think they've trained a lot of people from Argentina to do paintings and statues, and it's really an amazing museum. One of the I think the biggest tourist site in Buenos Aires is the big cemetery, and that is really really cool. It's kind of like I'd say it's similar to like New Orleans, but they're all these crypts that are built above ground, and they have you look through the window of it, and there's the stairs that go down underneath where there's coffins and things, and then the top was kind of almost like a little chapel, and there's just hundreds and hundreds of them in the cemetery. You have to pay to get in. It was like $3 or something. But wandering around that, and it looks like most of them, like the families are long gone, or they've died off with no descendants, and they've got these crypts just that have been sitting there forever, and there's big crazy statues, and just it's almost hard to describe how cool that is, and that I think is a must see. And I could tell that was really popular because there's a bunch of tour buses out in front of it, and I didn't really see a bunch of tour buses out in front of other stuff.
And there's some famous people buried there. Is Evita Peron there?
She is.
Tell
Yes.
the story of Evita, because I don't know it that well. I remember seeing the movie. Madonna played it, didn't she?
Madonna did play her, and I'm not an expert on her either. She was basically a young actress that ended up marrying the guy who became, I don't even remember what his title was, if it was president or emperor or whatever it was.
I think it was during the military junta, but maybe I'm getting my time
Yeah.
wrong.
So she marries the head of Argentina. She's not from money. She's beautiful. She's charismatic, and there's kind of this cult of personality around her. And there's still people that are either on the side of the Perones or the side of the anti-Perones of who they liked and didn't like, but she at least had the reputation for supporting the poor people and downtrodden, and trying to keep her husband to have policies that helped everybody. At least that's my impression of her. But there's some big murals of her. It seems like she's very well beloved still. I'd almost say almost like a Princess Diana would be maybe who I would compare her to for
Kind of lionized after death.
yes, yeah.
Okay, so now everyone watching this has probably got that "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina" song in their head.
I hope so.
Added Evita to their list of old movies to go back and watch. Before you go, one thing we should quickly talk about, because it's always good to give some practical advice, is actually getting to Argentina. And it always seems deceptive to me. We live in Canada, and to get to most of Mexico is in excess of a 5-hour flight. It's a long way down to Argentina, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the same distance from, I think, Houston to Buenos Aires as it is from probably New York to Paris. It's far. And if you look at a map, and I'm actually pulled up my phone right now and looking at it, I mean, it is incredibly far distance down. I mean, it looks about the same as Denver to London if you just took a ruler on a globe. So it's quite the journey to get down there. And because of that, flights are usually pretty expensive. That's kind of where when you get there, everything's cheap, but it's usually pretty expensive to fly there. And I don't know how you'd fly there from Europe or Asia. I mean, I don't know if you have to go through the United States or you go through Brazil, but I'm sure it's even more difficult.
It's a long way. A friend of mine actually spends his European winters, Argentinian summers down in Patagonia, and there's a direct Madrid-Buenos Aires flight, but it must be long.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And a lot of people make it even longer because Argentina is where almost everybody goes to Antarctica from. Yeah. So you fly into Buenos Aires, and then you fly down to the very tip, and I can never pronounce that.
Ushuaia.
Yeah, I figured you could. And then from there, you take a boat down to Antarctica. So that's more. I probably know more people who have done that than actually have gone on a trip just to Buenos Aires.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'd love to go to Antarctica, but as I understand it, you only go to the Antarctic Peninsula on those trips, which is still Antarctica would still be amazing. But I'd love to get down to the South Pole, but I don't quite know how I'm ever gonna manage to get to the South Pole. It's on the list though.
Yeah, and you're a little too young to be in the Falklands War, I think.
Little bit, yeah, little bit. We probably, you know what? We'll park the Falklands War.
You don't want to talk about the Falklands?
A relative of mine actually used to live there. Maybe we should do a Falklands episode.
Oh, that'd be so cool.
Do you know what? He's now married to the what's the title? It's basically like the High Commissioner of New Zealand.
Oh wow!
And he went to the Queen's funeral in London and stuff as the joint representative of New Zealand.
Wow.
He's a relative of mine, so maybe we could do a Falklands episode. But no, it's a long way down to Argentina. So if even from someone that lives in the southern US, it's as much of a journey as going to Europe, albeit without the time difference.
Yeah, I would highly recommend it for somebody. I don't know that I would recommend it for someone who is not a very seasoned traveler. If you're a seasoned traveler, you speak a little bit of Spanish to get around. I think it's an absolute bargain right now. Probably one of the best travel bargains in the world. But if you really haven't traveled and you're thinking about maybe your first trip, or you're thinking about going to South America or Central America for the first time, I probably wouldn't recommend it. I'd probably go to Costa Rica or Panama, or even Colombia. That isn't quite as far, and it has a little bit more tourist infrastructure.
So for that person that's on, international trip number 3, 4, 5 onwards, Buenos Aires is a good shout.
It is. And the other thing too, while we're talking, is you can very easily take a ferry to Uruguay for the day. And
took off another country.
It took off another country, and I did that. It's called Colonio del Sacramento, and it's this really beautiful little town on the coast that's ancient, and you can tour around, walk around. There's old forts and really great restaurants, old churches, and you can check off another country while you're there very, very easily, and I did that as well.
Okay, great. So it's cheap, food's good, lots to see and do. It's a thumbs up for Buenos Aires.
Yes, I think it was wonderful.
All right, it's now added to my ever-growing travel list. So the next time we speak, we will be covering Hong Kong post handover. The only time I went to Hong Kong, I was 14, and it was pre-handover. And I'd imagine it's a very different place, and you've got a trip coming up. So on the next episode, we'll be hearing about that.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it because I went there on the same trip I went to China as a kid. So I was 12 years old, and I don't really remember a lot about it. I think it meshes with Singapore in my brain as a 12-year-old, but I'm really excited to see what it's like now.
All right, well, enjoy and safe travels, and we'll see you when you get back.
Thank you.